Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In today's episode, we're joined by Joe Dahl, the General Counsel at Magic Eden, a cross-chain NFT marketplace. In this conversation, we discussed Joe's background in blockchain law and his role in establishing the precedents for the Cayman DAO Foundation model, how Magic Eden survived and thrived during the most recent bear market, Magic Eden's focus on user acquisition and those users' needs, navigating the tumultuous regulatory waters for the past handful of years, the many reasons to be positive on the US's new pro-crypto legislative and regulatory outlook, and so much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the guest or host might hold tokens discussed in any given episode. You can check out a disclaimer on www.neonewstoday.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on your favorite podcasting platform. And don't forget to share with your friends and family. Every rating, review, like, and comment helps us reach more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. With all that said, I really enjoyed speaking with Joe, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast. I am psyched to have today's conversation with Joe Dahl, the General Counsel at Magic Eden, an NFT marketplace that supports a dozen blockchain networks. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great, Dylan. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. I know a lot of people probably don't say this often, but I enjoy talking to lawyers because you guys have a really interesting perspective about the reality of the industry, and you kind of probably have your finger on the pulse for where we're going more than others would like to admit. So I'm excited to have this conversation, though it might be sobering, but hopefully there's an opportunity for excitement as well. So before we kind of like get to do the get to know yous, I just kind of want to get your sense from like a broader 10,000 foot perspective. In the US, we've seen a lot of pro-crypto narratives and moves at the executive level since Trump's administration took office. So since he took office in the past 3 weeks, what are some of the highlights so far? And what are some of the things in 2025 that builders in the US can look forward to?
Yeah, this is a great kickoff question. So, I mean, you got to start with the executive order. That's key. I think even actually before that, the appointment of David Sachs as crypto czar is a great start. He understands the industry. He gets it. I'm sure he had a heavy hand in drafting the executive order. But Dylan, that executive order is huge. I mean, it talks about establishing a regulatory framework, which, by the way, we've all been waiting for years. It talked about stopping regulation by enforcement, which you saw like a week or two later. You saw the CFTC, the SEC, and David Sachs on the same day come out with statements saying they're going to stop regulation by enforcement, which is a huge win. It talks about establishing not a CBDC, but US dollar stablecoins, which, once we get a stablecoin bill, which Dylan, I think is the first thing we'll get in 2025, that's like the floodgates are open because every major player, every major financial institution, every major market participant in TradFi will be very easily able to sort of get whatever license or registration they need to move cash on chain, money market funds on chain. I mean, that's trillions of dollars of assets. We always talk about like, when are people moving on chains? That's the catalyst for it. So I'm super excited for that. And of course, the really fun stuff, the strategic reserve. So that's like kind of, pie in the sky. We're excited about it, but I'm actually more excited about people getting into the on-chain economy. I think stablecoins is a big sort of gateway for that.
So I've long said that the two killer use cases in crypto are Bitcoin, because it's a non-state money that's peer-to-peer, and stablecoins, because people are actually using stablecoins demonstrably on-chain for the past few years, and that's only been growing. One of the concerns that a lot of people have about crypto, and maybe you're seeing like an age divide at the legislative level and at the congressional level, is that crypto might compete or harm the US dollar. But the stablecoin kind of adoption might flip that on its head. So could you maybe from your perspective share at the high level how stablecoins might increase dollar dominance throughout the world as we kind of adopt this next wave of money technology?
Yeah, turning on its head is like, you took the words right out of my mouth. Like we were in a position prior to this administration where stablecoins could theoretically replace the dollar as sort of the global means for transactions. Oil dollar, petrodollar, all these kind of things, it's inefficient moving cash, right, via wires, right, Swift, et cetera. And if there is a largely adopted stablecoin, that can very much replace the dollar. By prioritizing this, the U.S. it jumps ahead, it leapfrogs all the competitors, right? China's working on CBDC, a couple of people are working on CBDCs. But if the dollar, which is like the current means to do global transactions and commerce, is able to just be on chain, then it's setting itself up to be the dollar, the currency for the future. So like by taking the lead in stablecoins, what the U.S. is doing, it's cementing dollar dominance. I mean, by pegging the future stable coin, right, for the world to the dollar, like it's not checkmate, but it's wow. Like we've got United States dollar will basically reign supreme for the next coming generations because of this move. So really, really great foresight by U.S. Congress, sort of like prioritizing this first.
Cool. I definitely want to talk more about macro stuff at the U.S. level when it comes to like pro crypto regulatory and legislative actions, and also what's going on in Magic Eden. But let's take a quick step back and maybe just get a little bit of your background. So you've kind of got a rich background in corporate and business law. Can you just briefly walk us down the path of how you got into law, and then maybe what your genesis into blockchain and crypto looked like from what I'm guessing is around the ICO boom era?
Yeah, you nailed it. We were talking about some old products prior to the pod starting, and that's exactly right. So I was into crypto, early on, like 2013 or so, but didn't really dive in, didn't like own a bunch or buy a bunch. And then when Bitcoin crashed, I was like, this thing's kind of dead. Come 2016 and it's like cresting over $1,000 again. I was like, wow, this thing is back. And ever since then, late 2016, I've been locked in. So I started my legal career as a first year. I was one of the few attorneys in New York who was talking about crypto at these like crypto meetups. And some senior partner was like, I was begging, I was like, we got to do a crypto practice. We got to do it. It's so exciting. He's like, fine, if you can bring a client, we'll do it. So we brought in like 5-10 clients the next day. It's like, all these people need legal help. So I've been doing, been practicing law with respect to the the crypto industry for 8 years now. While at a firm called Fenwick West, which is sort of like the predominant crypto legal firm in the country, it's not sort of, it is. I launched, 40, 50 plus tokens. I'm sort of credited with coming up with the Cayman DAO Foundation model that you might be familiar with. And worked with a ton of big clients, Coinbase, Kraken, Yuga, the Punks, OpenSea, Magic Eden, you name it. These are all former clients of mine. So happy to be on the pod and love talking crypto, man. This is great stuff.
So when you kind of got into Bitcoin in 2013, did you kind of just grasp it immediately, or did you look at it and write it off and then come back at another time and after having like an aha moment?
I think I saw like a YouTube video. It might have been like Andreas or something. And I was like, wow, this sounds really cool and like innovative, but I don't know. And I just kind of like, that was cool. And I moved on to something else. I didn't give it the time of day, and I kind of paid attention to the price a little bit, but when it dropped, I kind of just walked away from it. And then when it came back in 2016, I was like, wow, this thing is still here. Let me double click here. And since then I've just been, once you go down that rabbit hole, everyone knows you're sucked in. And once you get it, just a light bulb turns on, you can't turn it off.
100%. So I think in crypto, things just accelerate so quickly, and an 8-year career in this space can feel like a 24-year career. So how has the industry's concerns and considerations evolved from when you first started practicing law in this realm in 2016-17 through today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we've gone through these periods of like existential crisis, that things are okay, to existential crisis. So we've had like an ebb and flow. I remember in 2013, we had the IRS Bitcoin guidance that came out, the digital asset guidance. And it said like any transaction is a taxable event, which means that you couldn't pay for your Starbucks with Bitcoin. You couldn't buy coffee with Bitcoin without it being like a taxable thing. And that was like existential. Oh, this is never going to make it, this tax like this. It's DOA. Since then, it's that whole framework has been like totally rolled back, right? And like the tax folks are kind of working on making things more streamlined. So, we've had like these existential times come up, and I think the Gary Gensler times were kind of like this, where you had this like really intense regulation by enforcement regime. And it wasn't just Gary and the SEC. There was other players, most notably the CFC, are doing this as well, where there's just ambiguity around how these digital assets are regulated. So rather than, provide no action letters to like say like, hey, this is our purview as SEC, this is our area to regulate. And we establish that by saying, you're not in trouble because you comply with our rules in these ways. It said, actually, we'll say you are in trouble because you violated our rules in these ways, and that will give us more ground to regulate these assets. So there's this like land grab between different agencies, and all the industry was just sort of caught in the middle. And we had like, arbitrary and capricious is this term, right? That, yeah, you're fine. And people are aware of, like, this is only a legal nerds thing that now like everyone in crypto knows because it's just like such like a headline, right? So the SEC got hit with that twice. I mean, they were going after people in bad faith, which is really unfortunate because this is a country built on innovation. So I think that like we've seen these ebbs and flows, I think, being like particularly existential and then like much better. But this by far, Dylan, is the most bullish sort of like regulatory legal backdrop we've ever had.
I typically don't like to talk about price because it's a super volatile industry. And, if you give financial advice, you're just opening yourself up for opportunity for ruin. You can harm other people. But I do kind of want to talk maybe about like sentiment, and the best way to capture sentiment is through price action. And so after Trump got elected, we saw Bitcoin kind of jump up at 40% in volume or in price. And after his election, we've kind of seen a decrease in price. Like we're currently doing this interview February 12th. So it's the beginning of February. There's all these kind of, as you just mentioned, bullish signals that are popping up from a regulatory and a legislative outlook. But if you go on crypto Twitter right now, the sentiment is just bad. A lot of people are down. The outlook for this industry is just not good. So where's the disconnect? Why does like token movement of name your favorite token going down? Why is that happening when we have so many kind of wins that are starting to pick up in our sales and push us forward?
Yeah. So Dylan, great point. Let me start out by saying none of what I'm saying is, legal advice or financial advice. It's my own views that match Dean's views, all these kind of things. Much love to crypto Twitter, right? But crypto Twitter, as a person who's on it and enjoys it, we have the attention span of like a goldfish, right? So like, we might be down for like 3 days and it's the end of the world, and then we're up for 24 hours and it's, everyone's no longer working at McDonald's and it's Lambos, right? So like, crypto Twitter, like I take a lot of the sentiment with like a grain of salt because it's just so mercurial. It's up and down all over the place, which makes it fun, but also isn't necessarily a good signal on like where we're going. I think the things that we should be sort of valuing and looking at more closely is like inflows to IBIT or these ETFs, which are just surging, absolutely surging, which is an indicator of institutional capital and normie retail capital entering the market. Generally these sort of like entries aren't meant to be short-term trading, right? These are positions being taken. I think you also need to look at the regulatory backdrop, right? We have an executive order outstanding that says we're going to have rules of the road within the next 6 months. They're going to at least propose some. That'll allow the industry in the US at least to have guidelines of what they need to do to comply and succeed and grow the businesses and the products they're working on, which is great for the growth. But I mean, we're talking about a strategic reserve for these assets. We're talking not at the federal level, but also like 23 states now. And, there's been some small countries that have been really sort of innovative in this space. El Salvador, Bahrain, I believe, a couple other, or Bhutan rather, who have taken these strategic reserves already. But by the US sort of entering this in a very serious way, there's basically no reason why any G20 country shouldn't hold some Bitcoin on its balance sheet, on its federal, in its federal bank. We're seeing a lot of Middle East countries that have been sort of covertly doing this for a while. Everyone's kind of aware of it. This big, like, open secret. But like this, once you have, the game theory with Bitcoin has always been, once someone starts buying it, it creates demand for people at that playing field to also buy it. And then that sort of invites people at a higher playing field to also participate. We're the US government. It doesn't get any higher than that. So this is, I hate to say this, I don't want to jinx it or anything, but there's this concept of like a super cycle of like, Bitcoin has these, I know you're fine, so no one wants to jinx it. Right? Don't say it. Don't say it. I'm saying it, Dylan. I'm saying it, man. How much more adoption can you get in the United States government buying and holding Bitcoin. Like if you're in after Uncle Sam, you're probably, kind of late to the party, right? To some extent, you'll still get, I think, in an inflationary environment where we have a lot of money printing happening. We just had a 3% CPI print today. So like inflation is not cooling down. We're not going to look at any rate cuts anytime soon, but inflation is going to be persistent. We're reshoring. We're blowing out the federal deficit. This has always been the Bitcoin thesis. The denominator, right, is always going to increase. The money supply will always increase. Bitcoin will always increase in value. That being said, there's this inflection point where everyone kind of gets it and gets in, and you have big price jumps that'll happen then. And I think that this may be the cycle where that happens. I don't want to jinx it, but
using that as the backdrop, maybe we can zoom back into like a vertical within the blockchain space, and then for the latter half of the conversation, we can come back out to the higher level view. But Bitcoin is the overarching trend that has governments and corporations talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency. But you and I have seen so many different verticals rise and fall, and some have even persisted over time. Mainly like DAOs, DeFi, NFTs. Now we're starting to see, AI agents coming on chain and the persistence of layer twos. So maybe we can zoom in a little bit further into you and your experience when you left working in the law office. The kind of like overarching meta or the narrative at the time in 2021 was DAOs, metaverse, and NFTs. These were major buzzwords in Web3. So what made you finally decide to take the leap from working in a law office and going to work into Web3 specifically? And how did you choose to land at Magic Eden, working at an NFT marketplace?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Appreciate this question. The law firm I was at, Fenwick, the practice was entirely crypto, some of the best attorneys in the country, and one of the funnest practice groups I've ever been in. Great clients, great group. Can't say enough good things. That being said, at the time, it was an opportunity to get into the industry. And I happened to be looking at a couple of different clients, and they're like, hey, lawyers are really expensive. Do you want to just come help us out here and work on this stuff? And I was like, yeah, that's super exciting. So I knew I wanted to make a jump. And, I think I had like 63 clients or so, and I'd worked with most of the sort of products in the space, or at least a bunch of them. There's so many, can't say most, but I'd worked with a number of them. And the Magic Eden team was just lights out, Dylan. I mean, next level. They were operating, a lot of times you walk in the room and you're like, oh, I can have a conversation with these guys. I see where they're going. This is wow, I need to be taking notes. But they're just operating in another hemisphere. And they proved it, right? They had wiped out a handful of competitors in the NFT space in the Solana ecosystem, who were very deeply entrenched. They fought off OpenSea from coming in. They raised a bunch of capital. And I think that we're in a world where you'll have large protocol developers that kind of win, right? I mean, I look at Web 1 as a great analogy. So HTTPS didn't necessarily have to be the protocol that won out, but it was, right? And I think that in this new iteration of the internet, where you have open source software as the backbone of where we're going, which is, I think, fantastic, a couple of these teams are going to be responsible for launching these things. Red Hat, for example, launched Linux. And Red Hat was acquired for $40 billion. Magic Eden to me felt like the team that had the knowledge, the know-how, familiar with the users, and just the horsepower. These guys grind to be one of these products that comes through this. So this was by far the best team I'd worked with in the industry, and it was just a no-brainer for me.
So maybe we can just do a quick Eli 5. A lot of the folks that listen to this pod are kind of Web3 natives, crypto natives, but I also want my mom to walk away learning something new. So for the moms of the audience, what is Magic Eden? How long has it been around? And what's kind of the primary purpose of an NFT marketplace?
Yeah, it's a great call. I mean, so Magic Eden, we're a place where you can buy and sell things. And those can be NFTs, which are, digital art or collectibles or, monkey pictures, or, maybe even your driver's license could be an NFT and you want to buy it someday. You'll do it on Magic Eden. California's working on stuff like that, by the way. We're also a place where you can buy and sell fungibles. You want to buy Bitcoin, you want to buy Solana, Ethereum, whatever you want to do, we can buy and sell fungibles really well as well. So what we want to try to do, Dylan, is bring everything on chain. The internet right now is not great. It's suboptimal. There's 4 or 5 websites that capture all the traffic, and everyone goes there and they know that they're not paying to use it because they are the product, right? Those companies are making their money, billions and billions of dollars off the back of the users, selling their data, all these kind of things. And that's not an internet that like I want to live in. And I don't think that the world should be in. It should be an internet where value goes to the people using the internet, where people are free and their information is protected. And in crypto and in companies that build tools to interact on chain. So when we say going from the regular internet to the crypto internet, we say it's going on chain. So moving people from this old internet of, big companies sort of like kind of leeching off the users to users built up internet means going on chain. And what Magic Eden really wants to do, our core mission is to bring people on chain. So we want to be a place for all on-chain assets, whether it's fungible, non-fungible, special monkey pictures or digital currencies, whatever it is. We want to be the place where people come to buy and sell those things.
What's the major hurdle then for onboarding my mom? Because I just connect my MetaMask to Magic Eden. I've played around in various different ecosystems. I've played around on different dApps, on different interfaces, and it's intuitive for me to start using Magic Eden. But like, where are we in terms of adoption for getting mainstream? What's missing? What do we need to do to make it easier for them?
Yeah, it's a great question because there is sort of this like hurdle, right? I mean, set up a MetaMask wallet, like remember your seed phrase, and like if you forget it, all your stuff's gone. And you just need that to even think about interacting with a website like Magic Eden. So there's all this user friction. It's just like not great. So I think it needs to start with basically projects having their own first level user acquisition. Right now, if we spend $1 on marketing, the value of that dollar goes to the wallet, goes to Coinbase first, so people can get money on chain. And then it goes to the wallets so they can move money from Coinbase to the wallet, and then it goes to us. So the ability for projects, particularly, retail user-facing projects where people trade monkey pictures like ourselves, like it's really tough to bring people directly on chain. So to address this, we launched Magic Eden Wallet, and it's been great. We've had like $200 million in volume, which is kind of crazy, and it's still pretty new. But we want to make that on-chain experience, like moving people on-chain experience, as seamless and as easy as possible. And it's tough, Dylan, because there's some like security trade-offs that happen. So for example, it's best practices to take your 24 or 12 character seed phrase, write it down somewhere, maybe in different locations, lock it up, right? And then you know that your funds are safe, right? But man, it's really difficult for new users. So there might be a world where they sign on just like you said into your Google account with like a password and a backup phrase. And if they choose to take an extra step and be more sort of security conscious and remove their seed phrase, they can do that. We'll provide that optionality. But the first step of sign on should be as easy as like your fingerprint on your phone. So we're working on things like that.
Cool. This next question is kind of near and dear to my heart because before we hit record, I told you that I got my start in the Neo ecosystem, and I very much came into Neo during the bull run of 2017 when ICOs were crazy and there were only like 4 chains that could handle tokenization, and CryptoKitties clogged Ethereum. So it was like Qtum, Neo, maybe another chain or two. And so when I came to working in blockchain and started working in the Neo ecosystem, this was the hottest ecosystem. It was a top 10 blockchain project. But as bull markets come and go, we saw the desire for launching tokens in this ecosystem wane. And if you just like look at the price chart of Neo, you can see that there hasn't necessarily been a lot of user retention over the years. So so many people come into a community during a bull run, and then it's really the bear market that keeps the community members around, and you see who's willing to stick through it through thick and thin. And without beating around the bush, NFTs were kind of one of those major craze topics in 2021, though they've still been able to retain trading volume. I mean, I think it was something like $8.7 billion in 23, $8.4 billion in volume in 24. So clearly this is not an asset class that has gone away, but it does not have that kind of like Cinderella darling moment like it did in 2021.
Yeah,
so over the past 3-4 years, what have been the lessons learned that Magic Eden has extracted from the community members that were willing to stick around through thick and thin? What are some of the things that you and your team have learned that have really solidified your desire to keep working in the NFT realm?
Yeah, this is great. So first off, we love NFTs. We're actually super bullish on NFTs. And just a little tip of the hat for ourselves. We are now by far the number one in users and revenue for NFTs of all marketplaces. And we don't really measure volume because some marketplaces kind of let a lot of suspect volume go through. So we look at users and revenue as the key sort of metrics. We're number one, which is great. And testament to some of the other teams out there. OpenSea is such a goat, and it's been around for a long time. And a lot of respect for them, what they built. But like, it's nice to unseat them for sure. And you know what? We're committed to NFTs. There's still parts of the Ethereum market, particularly where OpenSea and Blur have market share, and we want to come for that, right? Like, we think NFTs are bullish long term, and we're not walking away from it. It might be monkey pictures now, but in the long term, it can be anything from monkey pictures to bond tranches to ISDAs, derivative instruments. These are $40 trillion asset classes. So we like NFTs. We like being like the top dog in NFTs if we can be. We think we're there now. We want to sort of like solidify that position. But I mean, to get to your deeper question of like, there's a lot of, crypto is the most cyclical industry in the world, and there's a lot of shakeout and a lot of volatility. The biggest takeaways that we've learned is like, you really got to focus on two things. Your users, first and foremost. They're the ones that made you, the ones that took you to where you are. They're the reason for your success. And one of I think one of our biggest key differentiators between some of our NFT competitors is that we really, really focus on user services, taking care of our users. Like, our ops teams, like 24/7, they're happy to help. We are constantly looking at tweets of like users like, oh, we should fix this thing, we should make this better. Like, we spend maybe way too much time on that, to be honest, but we're always trying to improve, and we're always like, we really cherish and value user feedback. And I think that's very important if you want to like stay on top. And if users are asking for things like, we want token trading as well, then we're providing that now. And like I mentioned before, we have like a lot of volume in token trading, and we're happy to sort of like diversify. The second thing, Dylan, is really culture. You can have all the plans in the world, but if your culture isn't there, you're not going to be able to execute. So we think culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we've really spent a lot of time really focusing up, shoring up our culture internally. The idea being that there's going to be a lot of deviations here, but if our culture is done well, we run a business well, like it's profitable, we employ people in a manner that like allows them to grow and allows them to contribute to the business in a way that like reflects the market. So we hire people that actually use the products and are part of crypto Twitter and all these things. We're going to be in a position to pivot as needed and to come out of whatever happens to Web3 to be one of the leading projects. There was thousands of internet projects, right, that all had their own marketplaces, but Amazon made it out of it because they had the best culture and they had the best business sense. And like that kind of playbook, we don't want to be Amazon, right? There's a lot of issues with sort of like this top-down approach. We'd have to be, driving value from the bottom up, and that's part of the token, I think. But there's a lot of inspiration there on like how to operate a business.
Yeah, and so what is the kind of like employee count like at Magic Eden? Did you guys have to go through the similar sort of cut the fat in 2022 and then start rebuilding and growing your team from there? And what's kind of like the state of the team that's operating Magic Eden right now?
Yeah, so one of the toughest times in the company was actually sort of a layoff that occurred back in 2022. This is when a lot of companies were doing this, like Disney was doing it, and it was just kind of happening. And Dylan, not many people know this, but Magic Eden was the fastest unicorn in Silicon Valley history. We had a 1.6 billion valuation like 7 months after founding. And with that, we grew from like a 20, 30 person team to like 150 real quick. And we, when we kind of caught our breath in 2022, realized like, wow, like we probably overhired. We didn't have good systems in place, a good culture in place for like, appropriate hiring. So we had to do a reduction in force. So I think we laid off like 22% of the company or so. And we really spent a lot of time focusing on like our philosophy around hiring, our hiring process, and really just kind of iterating on it and making it better, more resound. And I think that's these kind of processes and culture building is what I was kind of mentioning before. These are key to building a solid company. Now we're close to 200 people, which is big, to be honest. But, we have a lot of ambitions and we have a lot of things to build. So good times.
What are sort of the events that your team goes to? Is it NFT specific conferences and workshops and meetups, or is it more blockchain crypto specific?
It's a bit of everything. We have a U.S. company and a non-U.S. company. The U.S. company goes to U.S. events, non-U.S. company goes to non-U.S. events. We try to keep those things kind of separated where we can. But it's a broad range, Dylan, because we have users that are, retail. So it's a lot of like retail facing events, NFT, NYC, stuff like that. But we're also protocol developers, right? I mean, on both the Solana side and on the Bitcoin side. So like we came up with partially signed Bitcoin transactions, which is like a pretty cool protocol with open source. And we plan on developing a lot more of that. So, any sort of conference, whether it's dev facing or it's retail facing, you'll find Magic Eden folks there.
So I think prepping myself to get a bullish response, but as I mentioned earlier, NFTs sales last year had their second best month in December. Q4 just saw an uptick in general in NFT sales. So I think despite the fact that we're in unshaky territory from a token holder's perspective about the outlook of just insert crypto coin price here, are NFTs back?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the meta has certainly shifted to meme coins, I think. But I mean, we didn't have a fungible trading business till the last couple months of 2024. But Dylan, we had our most profitable year of the company's history in 2024, almost entirely off the back of NFTs. We made about $73 million in profit. And that's mostly driven by NFTs and efficiencies on the company side. So, NFTs aren't going anywhere. Yeah, they're definitely like the limelight's being shared for sure with meme coins, and meme coins are like definitely a dominant position right now. But NFTs have a place to stay, and I think that like what NFT is today will evolve, right? Like right now it's monkey pictures and things, but in the future it's everything from look at the world around you. The things that are fungible are like currencies, like certain commodities. Everything else is non-fungible, is unique. So if our digital footprint reflects that, and right now it does in the non-on-chain world with like your Instagrams, whatever, all those things are unique. Photos, media, audio, all that. This is where NFTs are going. Gaming, right? So even if revenues do grind down NFTs, which we are seeing, we definitely want to stay sort of a dominant player in the space.
I think we can make an argument for the meme coin narrative being so forefront and meta right now as a direct result of Gary Gensler and the SEC and kind of how they enabled traders in the US to be able to access certain types of blockchain and crypto projects. But we can talk about that in a minute when we kind of like zoom out and start talking about regulatory and legislative stuff. I just want to maybe pick your brain a little bit about the quality of projects, NFT projects launching today versus like the blue chips of last cycle. And those blue chips might be like Punji Penguins, Azuki, CryptoPunks, BAYC. These are kind of like the name brands that have been able to survive the past 3 years. So what do like the prospect of today's blue chips look like as compared to those that came about in 2021?
Yeah, some of these 2021 projects are sort of just like timeless. Like punks are in museums now. Like these are like the Bitcoins of NFTs, and they have sort of this like historical significance that new products are going to have a hard time capturing because they're new, right? But what we've seen, it kind of reminds me of the meme coin phase to some extent. 2021, you had just products launching all the time. And sometimes teams had, plans and like products associated with the NFTs and, cool stuff going on. But a lot of times they didn't. There wasn't a lot of substance there. And I think the big shakeout following with the 2021 NFT boom has been to, current NFT projects have plans. They have a video game. They have some sort of like culture thing going on where they're like selling cool clothes or, whatever it is. They have a community they're trying to inspire with these things. So I think there's been a lot of learning in the industry. You have a lot more, it's higher quality products that are being launched in the NFT world, which is exciting, frankly.
The thing that kind of got me bought into the vision of NFTs wasn't necessarily like the monkey on chain or the 16-bit image, but it was more like you can own in-game items or you can be denoted as a member of like a social club. One of like the killer use cases that I thought would have just sent NFTs to just the absolute moon would be like Taylor Swift creating a club where if you owned one of Taylor Swift's NFTs, you could go meet up with her before or after a concert in one of the cities she's going on tour. And so I think that the potential use cases for NFTs are just like so killer. Maybe we lost that kind of messaging because it's easy for people to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you can just write off the cryptocurrency and blockchain in general as a scam until, of course, Bitcoin passes all-time highs, and then all of our friends are calling to ask us if now's a good time to get in. But that's neither here nor there. The underlying opportunity that NFTs can offer have remained unchanged. Are there any new kind of innovations that have emerged between 2021 and now that can add to those sort of real world use cases that an NFT can offer to a holder?
I'm sure there are, but I think that what's even more important to highlight is that you're seeing some of these initial like theoretical use cases actually happening. A lot of credit to President Trump's campaign team. They launched these NFTs, and these NFTs gave access to meet him at Mar-a-Lago, and he did that. And that was like such an innovative thing. It's this Taylor Swift concept idea that's been done now by the sitting president of the United States, and which is just like wow to say out loud, to be totally honest. But I think that we saw at peak NFTs 2021, we saw a lot of like large brands coming in. Like we did deals with and helped launch NFTs with the AB InBev. With Bugatti and like a bunch of different like, major car brands and stuff, Aston Martin, things like that. And you had all these major brands like poking their feet in and checking this stuff out. And it feels very much like early internet where there's all this theoretical, potential for new products, new experiences, new economies essentially to spring up and like an online fashion versus an on-chain fashion. And companies were like flirting with it. They were like testing things out in small capacities, but there wasn't really a true push to move things online in the early internet days. And then something switched, and suddenly every company had to be majorly involved with the internet. And I think we're kind of just waiting for the switch at that point. I think that having these use cases be refined by people like Trump's team, right? That's a good example. Is helpful and progressive, but like it's gonna be really exciting to see what this like catalyst will be. And honestly, Dylan, I think it's gonna be a game. Crypto games. There's a handful of crypto games that are pretty fun, and their assets are on chain. And like it's gonna be really really cool when you can take your sword from one game and trade it for a wand or whatever from like another game. That's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be a way better user experience. It's gonna open up an entire new world of on-chain economies where you have game assets, going nuts. Like look at like CSGO skins. Are you familiar with this at all?
Yes.
It's good. They sell for millions of dollars, and it's all like, trust me, bro, I'll send you this like thing and you send me some cash, and that should be on chain. So I'm really excited for gaming, actually. I think it's some time to take, but I think that'll be the catalyst that gets people on chain.
Yeah, I mean, isn't gaming and in-game items sort of the whole thing that spurred Ethereum to begin with when Vitalik lost his super rare sword on WoW?
Is that really what happened? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he either his sword got removed by the WoW administrators, or it lost its ability to do what it was supposed to do, and that was kind of the origin of Ethereum. I should be able to own this thing, and nobody should be able to take it from me because I worked my ass off to get this, or I spent a lot of money to get this, and I should be able to hold it for as long as I hold it. And so that was kind of the inspiration or the aha moment that Vitalik had for smart contract functionality and kind of like the genesis of what Ethereum would be. And so maybe as we kind of like shift into talking about a specific blockchain, Magic Eden does support 12 different networks. And so I'm curious, what have been some insights that you've had during your tenure at the marketplace as to the different market cycles that NFT projects might have on a per chain basis? We saw like ordinals really drive NFT volume when they came out, what was it, early last year or maybe even 2 years ago. So do you kind of see these waves in activity on a blockchain network basis? Or am I just kind of like building a hypothesis that isn't there?
I think there's something there, right? I mean, whenever you have new chains come online, you're going to have a flush, like a rush of activity, a flurry of activity. And this is partially driven by like chain teams giving grants, right, to get people on chain. It's partially driven by just being blue ocean and like there not being sort of like a blue chip NFT associated with that chain yet. So everyone's rushing to try to be that. So between the opportunity and grants, you have a lot of on-chain activity that happens with new chains like early on. And, our thesis is that we want to be there, because if it's really hard to be forward-looking and like be predictive in this industry because it's so dynamic, it's so cyclical. So we don't want to miss a chain that makes it. And if you're there early, you can also capture value, even if the chain doesn't sort of make it long-term. So I think it's okay to look at things like that. Bitcoin's a really good case study though. Bitcoin is, it's the sort of the big daddy chain, right? It's the original chain, truly. It's the original blockchain. And our thesis there was early on, I think we created the Runes marketplace like 2 months after they were invented, like ordinals were invented. Not Runes marketplace, the ordinals marketplace. And so we were super early. And our conviction was that, this is a chain that doesn't have the other things. There's no it's new in the sense that you now have NFTs and ordinals runes on it, so you can sort of be a blue chip. But there's not like grants going out, right? Which is sort of a big catalyst. Like, why be bullish? And the idea was that if we think that Bitcoin will be around, and we think NFTs will be around, or meme coins, you pick your use case, right? Then it makes sense to have a presence on Bitcoin in these capacities, in these verticals. And that was our bet. And initially there was some volume when it was new, but then it was kind of quiet for a while. Then a year later, it just exploded. So it really showed us that, we can't actually predict what's going to happen, but by setting ourselves up for success, sort of like putting ourselves in strategic positions, we can hope to capture upside when it does emerge.
Do you have kind of a playbook or a set of guidelines or metrics that you use to evaluate new blockchain ecosystems as they come about? Because there's hundreds now, and even like this past week, like Barachain just launched, and the Move ecosystem is really starting to take off. So it's got to be impossible to sift through all of these with. Even though there's 200 people working at Magic Eden, you don't have like 200 researchers. There's only so much capacity for a certain type of technical understanding that an individual might have to be able to sift through these blockchains and whatnot. So what's the sort of like higher level process for reviewing blockchains as they come about? And how does Magic Eden choose which networks to integrate support for?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, our business team works a little bit closer on that end. At a high level, we look at a handful of things, sort of anticipate on-chain users. We talk to the teams, and we kind of get a good gauge of like how bullish or bearish the team is, to be honest. Look at big partnerships they may have, whether or not they have sort of the core building blocks of an ecosystem, a DEX, an NFTs set up, all these kind of things. And if those exist, if the hype's there, right? We also look at like hype, crypto Twitter activity, all these kind of things. Who their backers are, if the product's VC funded. I know VCs are kind of like a third rail, and people don't like VCs in crypto, and that's fine. They can be very value extractive, right? Like I'm nothing against that viewpoint, but they can also be very indicative of like, maybe not very indicative, but they can be indicative of a product that will do well, right? If some VCs say like, hey, there's a shot this person does well, that can be an indicator that they actually will. But like I said, it's like one of many, many things. It's really around like what kind of ecosystem do they have drumming up, and how hyped for it is the community. I mean, are people psyched about this? These are the main sort of intangible things that we try to measure, and that can be tough, but these are the kind of things we look at.
Cool. So I want to spend the last 15 minutes or so of our time talking about just regulatory and legislative outlook. There's a lot of interesting things, good and bad, happening in the broader blockchain space in the US, which definitely impacts the world, whether we want to like it or admit it or not. So maybe to like kick off this portion of the conversation, and I'm not asking you to like dance on any graves, but OpenSea has kind of been the lightning rod for regulatory actions. So maybe we can just start a little bit with, how did the Wells notice that got sent to OpenSea kind of impact your outlook on Magic Eden, and what did that really do for the way that you guys choose to operate within and outside the US?
It actually didn't really impact how we choose to operate, because people like to say colloquially like, oh, crypto's the Wild West, there's no regulations. We view compliance with regulatory structure much differently. We flip it on its head. We say, because there's no directly on point regulations, we must assume that all apply, and we have to comply with all of them, which is a mess because you're looking at, everything from Bank Secrecy Act to tax to securities to commodities to consumer protection stuff there's just a host of regimes that you have to comply with as much as possible, which creates a lot of legal work. So we are already in a position of sort of philosophically where we thought that the company should be as compliant as possible with as many regimes that could be theoretically applicable to its products, which means basically as compliant as you can possibly be. The problem with the prior administration is that there was very much so a moving goalpost, and there was ambiguity. And this idea that you could come in and register didn't really make any sense to us, because who's going to be responsible for disclosures when it's open source software? There's just a lot of square pegs and round holes that didn't really fit. So the idea is to really understand all these regimes and sort of the policy imperatives that underpin them, and try to comply with those as much as possible in good faith as possible. So when we saw the OpenSea Wells notice come down, it wasn't a big surprise. We knew that sort of a number of people in the industry were being targeted on stuff. So it wasn't necessarily a surprising thing. It didn't really change how we approach stuff because we took a very, very conservative risk-off approach. We always have.
So that's at the kind of marketplace level, which is probably the most relatable to Magic Eden's outlook. But what about with projects? We saw Stoner Cats have to deal with the SEC. They had to pay a fine. Song a Day Man and one of his colleagues are suing the SEC. So what are the sort of processes for keeping a finger on the pulse for NFT projects and people associated with NFT projects that might be dealing with the SEC or might be going through litigation? How do those sort of actions and kind of outcomes impact how you look on regulatory kind of perspectives from the Magic Eden level?
So the history here, I think, is helpful. The SEC we'll pick on them for now, but they had this strategy where they would basically go after and started in fungibles, where they picked a couple tokens and they got settlements. They picked tokens that didn't have strong teams or any teams at all, had very little funding, and they basically said we'll put you out of business unless you settle right now. In the settlement, we want to do things like say your security. And then once they had a couple of those, which set up good precedent, they went after small exchanges that weren't doing well, were circling bankruptcy. And they said, hey, listen, unless you shut everything down and admit your securities exchange, via the settlements, we're going to create a very bad time for y'all. And they basically, put the thumb on these very small players and got the settlement to say, what did set these precedents? So once you set the precedent on the underlying, which is the particular token, then you do it on a marketplace. Now you tee up a broadside action against Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, and they did exactly that. And they said, look, we have these precedents. Now these aren't binding because a court didn't sanction these things because they're just settlements. But it gives them sort of firepower to say, we think you're wrong and this is why. And look at all these, settlements we have to back this up. So we've been watching that for a while, right? I think everyone in the industry was. And they started seeing a repeating pattern happen in NFTs. So Stoner Cats, Impact Theory, Flyfish Club, Cyberkongs, all these Cyberkongs in the UK, I guess, but all these different companies just had the SEC come after them and get these early layup settlements to establish a precedent. And then from there, it's okay, now they're starting going after exchanges, and we're just, OpenSea announces a Wells notice. So we saw the exact same playbook kind of play out. So I forget the initial part of your question, but that's some extra history for context.
No, I appreciate that. And I also forgot the initial part of my question, but we'll use this to parlay into another subject matter that I wanted to talk about, which is Coinbase's cases. And I really appreciate the path that you laid out for going after smaller projects, then weaker exchanges, and then boom, you can slap something on a larger exchange by claiming precedence. So the Coinbase is currently winning law battles left and right now. And they're currently fighting the SEC in court. So how did the win from January kind of maybe hamper the SEC's approach, A? And then B, had Gensler still been in office, would Coinbase still kind of have a fighting chance?
Yeah, there's a couple of Coinbase actions going on, one of which got us an arbitrary and capricious language, which is a big win for Paul Gerwal, the team over there. What that one was is Coinbase had basically said, hey, SC, we want directions here from you. We want instructions. And they got just dead silence. SC was, allegedly SC was not working with them in any capacity. They're either like begging for guidance. So they sued them, asking for rulemaking. And the court found that by the SEC denying them rulemaking, denying them engagement was done in an arbitrary and capricious manner. So that's a big win. The other more important win is the SEC's case against Coinbase generally. So they were alleging that Coinbase and basically all of its products violated securities laws in one manner or another. And the result of that would basically be shutting down the company. I mean, this is existential for Coinbase, which is just outrageous. It's a great American company. It employs a ton of people. It's sort of setting up the country to be sort of at the lead for this new capital markets that's going to come around in the future. To try to just sink that is just wild from a policy perspective. They could do many other things like do a no action letter or work with them to provide guidance. And Coinbase was, it seems to be very open to these kind of things. And the FCC seems like it was very much not into working with them. Hence the other case we talked about. But what happened was a couple of things got tossed out, like their wallet got totally tossed. The FCC's claims against Coinbase wallet got tossed out entirely because there was just nothing there. But a lot of the other claims really turn on whether or not the underlying assets are securities under the Howey test, and investment contracts specifically under the Howey test. And in the Southern District of New York, which is where most of these cases are brought, there's actually an internal district split. So sometimes you'll have different parts of the country, like one section of the country, like Wyoming, et cetera, and one section of the country in New York that come to different agreements on what their sections of the country think. And that's okay. And sometimes it goes to the Supreme Court and they'll kind of like make a decision on it. It's called a circuit split. This was a district split. So within the same circuit, Court of Appeal circuit, you had the same court, Southern District of New York, have differing opinions on whether or not the underlying assets are securities. I think it was Terraform and Coinbase that basically took opposite sides here. And this permitted what's called an interlocutory appeal, which is, it's like, hey, the case is normally you appeal a case once it's done. You say, okay, the case is done. We didn't like X, Y, Z that came from it. We're going to repeal them all at once. An interlocutory appeal is like a special thing. And it says, we're not even close to being done with this case, but we think this one issue is so important to the case. And we think that they got it wrong in such a major way that we want to appeal just a specific issue. And it's important enough that it should be decided upon and it will impact other cases. So that's what's happening here. And the issue is whether or not these tokens are securities. So like that's them getting that up for appeal is going to be a huge win. And I think that the change of the SEC could really result in them getting a win here. And that's floodgates for the whole industry.
If anybody was on crypto Twitter for the past couple years and read like Nick Carter's writings, there was the emergence of these kind of, and for lack of better terms, these shadow entities at the federal level who were purposefully, it seemed, going after crypto as an industry, blockchain as an industry, crypto as an asset class, and making it hard for businesses that work in Web3 to kind of integrate into traditional rails. Many such companies weren't able to get bank accounts. My lawyer and any other lawyer in the blockchain space can talk probably for an hour plus about the clients they've lost going offshore because they didn't want to deal with things in the US. So at a certain level, it stops being a conspiracy and it starts being something that's true. So another thing that Coinbase has recently gone through in the past month is these FOIA requests at the FDIC. And I think earlier this week, or maybe even last week, the transcripts from one of the judges in the FDIC came out, and he was basically livid at how the FDIC was limiting the information from the FOIA that was being given to Coinbase. So was there an Operation Chokepoint 2.0? Were we being kind of conspiratorial, or is... And I really hate to point blame at a previous administration wide swath, but like, was there a concentrated top-down level effort at snuffing us out? And are these kind of like court cases, particularly with the FDIC, highlighting how some of this, there might have been truth in some of these conspiracy theories?
Yeah, Dylan. So let me first off, let me give you something anecdotally. When I was at the law firm and we had so many clients in the space, right? Hundreds of them, frankly, in our group, we saw this happening, right? We saw major banking issues. For frankly, some products, they do things like, maybe they transfer funds around or whatever. And those things like, yeah, it makes sense to have some like banking hurdles. Other things are super innocuous, basic software development, right? Like has nothing to do with like money transmit, none of these sort of like issues that would be raised in setting up a bank account. Also get shut down, also have issues. And it was just such a huge pain. So just anecdotally, I've seen a lot of this, but definitively, we now have full evidence that this is real, right? There's sort of like, there's this idea of almost like gaslighting of like, oh man, are we just being too conspiratorial? Like, is this really happening? Or are these companies just not making it? Like, what's happening here? But that's not the case. I mean, Congressman French Hill, which is appointed to the House Financial Services Committee chair, and one of the things that he sort of ran on when he was sort of being considered for this position was investigating Chokepoint 2.0. And he's committed to that. And he's already sort of taken a lot of steps there. And as part of these FDIC initiatives that are coming out, we had these pause papers be released. So 23 pause papers were sent to all the prudentially regulated banks and more, presumably. And then what they said is like, we strongly encourage you to not bank crypto clients, essentially. 23 times federal government has told banks like, hey, you better not bank these people. That's aggressive, right? That's like a veiled threat in a major way. So this is very real. And we're already starting to see, that's part of the executive order. The executive order specifically calls out Chokepoint 2.0 as something that it needs to be investigated, which is very much welcomed. We're starting to see banks walk this back publicly. So a couple of banks have made statements around like, we have always, been champions of like free and accessible banking. So like that tells me they're scared. And banks, man, they only got themselves in mind. So like I think that if given the opportunity, they'll turn on the FDIC or whomever sort of sent them these things very, very quickly. I think we'll get down to the bottom of this very, very soon. But yeah, no, it was real. It was very real.
A few minutes left. And so we have a lot of kind of high level positive things happening in the US right now. We're starting to see new cryptocurrencies, ETFs being put forth like Doge, Solana. We're starting to hear potentially staking allowed in ETH ETFs. We're starting to see potential pro-crypto CFTC and SEC chairs. We had this executive order that talked about a working group that's going to be happening. So I think maybe more broadly, what are the realistic thing? Of course, the BSR that we talked about earlier, stablecoin legislation, FIT 21 potentially. What are the things that realistically we should be focusing on as an industry and really put more importance and more precedent towards that will have a more positive impact on us? Like, sure, the BSR would be great. I think many can make an argument that the United States government won't go out and buy our bags. So maybe that's not necessarily the highest on the list. But of all the things I just mentioned, what are like the things we should really be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost stablecoin bill. Once you have the rules of the road established for that, so that things like large banks can start issuing their own stablecoins or moving money market funds on chain. This is really opening the floodgates for people to come on chain, and people being the cash market, which is trillions of dollars globally. Once that happens, sky's the limit. Because once your cash is on chain, this sort of fiat onboarding problem goes away. And it becomes very, very easy to sort of for the rest of the on-chain economy to prosper. So I think stablecoins, it's critical for US dollar dominance, which is very important. And it's also critical for the industry sort of becoming sort of the fore, taking over Web 2. So I think that's key. The next big thing is definitely going to be a market structure bill. Because once you have that in place, there's so many, America is so fortunate to have really, it is ground zero for crypto innovation. Right. And I think that starts with Bitcoin and it's just carried on from there. And it's the future of capital markets. It truly is, I believe. And beyond that, it's the future of sort of like consumer retail internet as well. And to have so many talented builders in the United States, and by the way, many have fled, but to have so many in the United States is such a competitive advantage. And if we get a market structure bill that says these are the rules of the road, this is how you can comply, that's going to open up the doorway for a new age in sort of American capitalism as companies come in, products come in, and they launch these tokens, these protocols, and hopefully the bill is done and structured in such a way that promoting that it incentivizes the development and launching of open source protocols, free open source software. That's going to create a global good, and it will really put America and all the innovators here in pole position to sort of lead the future here.
Cool. Well, Joe, I think I got through 2/3 of my question list for you. So those are always signs of a good interview. Our time is up, and if anybody is interested in reaching out to you or learning more about the work that you're doing at Magic Eden, what's the best way that they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can check me out on Twitter. I'm at ShoeDog. The first O is 0. And please check out the Magic Eden handles and the Magic Eden website. We're a fun place to hang out.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time you shared and hearing your insights into how NFTs survived, where they're going, and your outlooks on pro-crypto legislation and regulation here in the States, and hopefully the more positive impacts abroad.
Thanks, Dylan. Really appreciate it. This has been great.
Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please consider showing your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcasting platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and brings even better content your way. We'd also love to hear from you, so please drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube to share what topics you'd like us to cover or who you'd like to see as our next guest. And if you or someone you know would make a great guest, please reach out. We're always looking for fresh voices and new perspectives. And for our NEO token holders out there, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017, and we'll continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. So once again, thank you for listening, and we can't wait to catch up with you next time.